Hello and welcome to the Thursday 905 Roundup. My name is Roland Tanner.
I am Joel McLeod.
And we have, as usual, our three top stories for this week in the 905, or certainly this half of the 905. And some quite significant ones as we get closer and closer to Election Day. And starting off with Halton Catholic District School Board, where two trustees, we knew a while ago the two trustees had been, well, I'll hand it over to you, Joel, and you tell the story because you've got the facts at your fingertips.
Yeah, so for those of you who do not know, there's been trouble brewing, or just discontent, I should say, in the Halton Catholic Board. So what happened is early this summer, two of the trustees, Trustee Vincent Antomasi and Helena Carabella, at two separate special school board meetings, were found to be in violation of the board's code of conduct for its trustees, and were censured. And then, basically, Trustee Antomasi has been suspended from all board meetings until November 15th. Helena Carabella was suspended for 2 meetings in September, so that suspension has lifted. But for a while, we didn't know what led to that decision. It was a report that was kept locked in a drawer somewhere in the HCDSB files until earlier this month. The board had a meeting and voted to basically release it to the public. So now we know why those two trustees were disciplined. We had the full report on our website, so you can go and take a look at it. There's too much for us to go into. We'll take it too much of this episode to go through it. But basically, starting off with Trustee Antomasi, 25 individual events were in the report of code of conduct violations. The majority of the incidents were revolving around email exchanges between Trustee Antomasi and Trustee Duarte, who's the chair. Basically, how should I put this? Petty grievances, just calling into question the competency and the professionalism of the chair and whatnot, and kind of ridiculousness of that way. That it just kind of, you can see, it just leads to a very negative working relationship between trustees. But there was there were two things that caught our eye. Or my eye, I should say. One was an incident back during the pandemic. So what happened was there's a not-for-profit called Evidence-Based Social Enterprises Canada. This not-for-profit, for anyone who doesn't know, they did the donate a mask. So basically, they raise funds, buy masks, and they would help distribute masks where needed during the pandemic. As I'm sure we can all agree, a vital, important role to do to help make sure that we were all safe during the pandemic. Apparently, we don't know exactly the details, but apparently the foundation or the not-for-profit reached out to the board to inquire about doing some kind of partnership, presumably, where ACDSB schools would help fundraise for this not-for-profit. Now, before this could be brought to the board for an official vote or to be discussed in a more robust manner, the executive director emailed back to the board, basically saying that Trustee Antomasi had called them and spoke with them on a one-on-one phone call, and said that basically had to correct the usage of the word mission versus mandate to help vulnerable people, a bit pedantic. But then basically came up to say that the ACDSB could not help them, that they take direction and masks from a higher level of government, and that Trustee Antomasi advised that they instead go talk to their local MPP. Needless to say, this basically burned that bridge between the board and the not-for-profit, and the not-for-profit said, we're just rescinding the offer. We decided we're not going to work with you at all anymore. And this was before the board could make any decision or any real public debate on the matter. The second instance that caught our eye were text messages between Trustee Antomasi and Chair Duarte, that after anyone who's listened to this podcast who has sat down and watched an ACDSB board meeting, they're all on YouTube, by the way. You can, if you want to waste your time, go watch them. often the meetings degenerate into rancor and discourse. Trustee Ian Tomasi is often being called out for interrupting and speaking out of turn, etc. In a number of text exchanges, presumably after some of these meetings ended, he is calling out Trustee Duarte as being incompetent or lacking understanding. Quote, you are at disadvantage because you just don't know and don't take the time to find out / incompetence. Me, chair, you just don't know. Please learn procedure for the benefit of HCDSB. It was one exchange. One that caught, apparently that stood out to Trustee Duarte was in relation to the board of Trustee Ian Tomasi refusing to acknowledge a redacted individual's educational qualifications during a discussion at the board table. Trustee Ian Tomasi texted to Trustee Duarte, here's examples of typical practices in Canada, which Trustee Duarte, according to the report, took to imply criticism of his competence in the matter due to the fact that Trustee Duarte, country of birth, is not Canada. So take that as you will. All in all, it paints a picture of a trustee who, for whatever reason or not, is at odds with his counterparts on the board and with his colleagues, and as such, the board found that they should discipline him the way that he was. Going on to, sorry.
Well, I was just going to add a quick clarification on that final one. I mean, we'll come on more. We don't actually. So Trustee Ian Tomasi was talking about someone who we don't know. Their name is taken out of the report. However, the person clearly was not originally born in Canada, and therefore the implication was that Ian Tomasi sort of just refused to acknowledge this person's qualifications because they're not Canadian, and hence the response, this is how we do things in Canada, being interpreted. And I think that is a pretty fair interpretation. I mean, a very, very troubling form of words. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
Yes. Moving on to Trustee Carabella. Her report is a little bit more straightforward. Basically stems from the use of her e-newsletter to stay in touch with constituents, essentially. Two things, again, stand out. There are numerous examples of emails of these newsletters being sent out. And without going into them line by line, there are instances documented where she calls out her trustees for making disparaging remarks. Particularly in one instance, she calls out our fellow trustee, Trustee Patrick Murphy, who we've had on the podcast before when he served as the board chair. And questioning his Catholicity and his whether or not he gets the point. Same as she calls out Vice Chair Brenda Agnew for essentially accusing her of plotting to remove a motion from one of her motions from the agenda. This stems from two things. There's one, she uses her newsletter essentially to undermine the board's masking policy. The board elected in their meeting at the start of the pandemic to mask from JK all the way through the schools. Every grade in their schools would be wearing a mask. Trustee Carabella, in her newsletters to her subscribers, have said essentially she wants to reverse that. She thinks it's wrong, and what have you. The other one stems from the Sanctity of Life motion, which was a motion back in 2018, very contentious. Without getting into the details, the end result would have been fundraising efforts in the board would basically be ended. There would be no things like Terry Fox run MS Society, Cancer Society of Canada. All these things would end due to the wording of the program. She brought it back to the board in this term recently in the past year, and numerous times she's done this. Each time it's been voted down or removed from the agenda altogether. Yet she constantly seeks to question the Catholicity of the board, of her fellow board members, due to them voting this motion down. That being said, in the code of conduct that she's violating, you can't disparage your fellow trustees. And once a decision is made at the board level, it must be supported and endorsed, but it may not endorse, but it has to be supported by all members of the board. Think of it like a federal cabinet meeting or provincial cabinet meeting. Once the decision is made, everyone at that cabinet table must support that decision. The time for debate and questioning is in the meeting. You can voice your concerns, you can voice your objections, you can vote nay on it. But once it is passed or defeated, you support the board's decision on it. Is what the code of conduct says, and they accuse her of violating this.
And on that basis, I mean, it's clearly she's questioning decisions that have already been made, and clearly there's no doubt that according to those rules, she has transgressed them. I mean, I think there's two separate issues here. There's the individuals concerned, Trustee Carabella and Trustee Ian Tomasi, both. Well, intimacy is not so much of the kind of religious right, if you like, but certainly has aligned himself with that grouping more and more over the last 4 years. And Trustee Carabella, no doubt, is of a religious conservative bent, even by the standards of the Catholic School Board, which is already tends to be that way inclined. I think within that there's a slightly separate issue, which I think is only fair that we do bring up, and it's a really intimacy and Carabella are irrelevant to the point I'm about to make, which is that, and I've seen this at council level as well. It's this a municipal government. Once a decision is made, you're not meant to question it, and I find that a very really difficult thing, and it's slightly unrealistic to say that you're a politician, you're judged by how you vote. And something that you may object to extremely strongly, you once the decision is made, you have to support it. And I get that kind of idea of collective responsibility that you have in the cabinet, but then that's party politics, and we all appreciate that in a political party, you do what you have to suck it up sometimes. So I think that's difficult. And then I do also find it problematic. I mean, it's completely normal. This is the way that elected boards and boards of directors and this is the way that Parliament works and the legislature works as well. So this is not unusual. This is not just a Halton thing. However, when you've got a small board of trustees, it is slightly uneasy. It makes one slightly uneasy to see that the judge, so to speak, the person carrying out the investigation, is one of the trustees who is clearly on the other side of the field, if you like. This is a very highly divided board, and we've got Councillor Duarte acting as the investigator in one case, and Councillor Agnew acting as the investigator in another. Well, those two are clearly not friends of these people. Now, it all has to be voted on by the whole board, so it has to have board approval before anything can happen. But we know how the board is divided. It's always going to vote in favour of it's not a great surprise that the violations of the code of conduct were found. Now, having said all that, these are clearly outrageous behaviour going on by these two people. I mean, Vincent Ian Tomasi's behaviour is frankly bordering on the bizarre. I mean, some of these complaints relate to, in one case, basically the board is trying, the staff of the board, the paid staff, are trying to organise the Christmas letters out to the contacts of the school, and so they're saying, can you send in Trustee Ian Tomasi? Can you send in your message so we can make sure
it was all the trustees? It should be like they said, by a certain date. Can you send in all the? We just need all your stuff in by this date, so we have enough time to collate it, put it together, format it, make it look nice and pretty, and then get it in the mail or get it emailed out, whatever the case may be. Yeah.
Now, a normal reaction to that kind of thing is, sure, yeah, I'll do what I can. Trustee Ian Tomasi's reaction is this is some kind of let me pull up the actual words so that I know I'm not misquoting him. Basically, sort of like, no one can tell an elected trustee what to do, only and he may be technically right. Under a strict interpretation of the law, perhaps this is true, but it's a completely inappropriate way to ask someone who's just trying to get the Christmas email out or the Christmas letter or whatever the goodness it is. And that's just, most of the objections are things like this. So we've got someone who's just throwing a kind of hand grenade into the business of the board constantly over tiny, completely irrelevant, completely stupid things, and also being extremely offensive to colleagues, calling their competence into question. Meanwhile, they're not the ones who are kind of derailing everything. And if you've watched board meetings, to say they're derailed is an understatement. I mean, they are wrecked time and again by Trustee Ian Tomasi and others. For some reason, I can't pronounce his name today. I apologize for that. That's just my bad pronunciation at work.
There are two essential core tenets. Like I'm looking at when I look at the two reports. I'll be honest. Helena Carabella's report, I agree. There is something about her being able to, whether or not you agree or disagree with her point of view. She's an elected official, and there is something for her to be able to send out a letter saying, or an email saying, "Hey, we want. I disagree with this point of view or this decision. I voted the way I did because of it." But where I think she crosses the line in her email is the disparaging remarks towards her fellow trustees. Like there is something about decorum. Like you can say, I disagree with the policy and the vote that was taken. I am going to, this is why I voted the way I did. Nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. But when you start insulting your fellow colleagues, it's petty and vindictive. And basically the report dealing with Vincent Ian Tomasi is basically this taken to another level. I think it paints a picture of a board that has completely fallen into rancor and discord. Like there is clearly no common ground in this board for these. Like I don't see how these two can go back to working with colleagues and say, yeah, you know what, I crossed the line. I'm sorry, I got overzealous. My apologies and whatnot. It's very clear. Vincent Ian Tomasi does not want to work with the board. He wants to rule the board. He wants to have his way or the highway. I don't know if it's a matter of Catholicity or whatnot. I very much looking at this is he just cannot accept that he might be wrong or that somebody else has the seat of power, the chair. Like these are very pedantic and very petty grievances.
It's pedantic to an slightly troubling level, troubling as in, or just eccentric. Right. There are people who disagree in government and who will try and to derail each other. And to an extent, that's fine. That's part of the game, I guess. But this is, just simply bizarre. I mean, I want an example here, right? Yeah, so some trustees all receive the same kind of emails from various groups. So one of these is OCSTA.
The Ontario Catholic School Trustee Association.
Okay. And so they all get these emails, and Trustee Ian Tomasi would forward these on to the other trustees, and the other trustees sort of reasonably said, hey, we already get these, you don't have to forward them on. And, actually, I'm sure they're all very busy people. They all get lots of email. It'd be nice if we don't have to sort of spend those extra few seconds deleting them. Again, normal reaction is like, oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, of course you get them. I won't forward them anymore. Here's Vince's response. Mr. Chair, as a Catholic and a supporter of HC, DSB, and as elected trustees, none of us can be censored, muted, and silenced by the Chair or individual trustees by asking any to refrain from disseminating information that relates to educational matters directly, indirectly, either before or after board decisions, meetings, or any time. It's like they're just asking that you don't forward emails that they're already getting. It's like, this is craziness. But that's that, and then we have a picture. Oh God, yeah, absolutely.
Like how does this board function when you can't, like, if you were in a workplace and this person was doing this behavior, you say, can you not forward me, like, I already get the emails, don't forward them to me, or can you meet this deadline? This is a project, this is a sign, we just need to get this done, and say, I disagree with the rules. I'm not going to do it. You're going to do it on my time because I say this is how I think we should do it, and we're going to do it my way. And expect everyone to bend around how you interpret the rules. No workplace would function like that. Person would be gone from that workplace in a heartbeat. Like, they'd be called on the HR, and then
and if they're not gone, then you have a very problematic workplace.
Yes.
met people like this over years. I mean, I think many of us will recognize, but this is an extreme case of that kind of person who just will not compromise on even the smallest thing. Not on, well, to use a sort of religious example, wouldn't compromise on the number of angels you can fit on the head of a pin. That's the kind of thing that we're dealing with here. I mean, and coming back to Trustee Carabella, I mean, she is. I mean, again, what in their different ways, they're both derailing the business of the board with things that the board shouldn't be wasting its time on. One is she's basically there to keep on moving the motion of anything, to forward the so-called pro-life, anti-abortion agenda at every opportunity. And the fact that it's been voted down once and voted down twice, and it doesn't stop her. No, I'll just bring the motion forward. Now that in itself contravenes the code of conduct, but it's also completely contrary to what the trustees are meant to be doing, which is ensuring the good governance of schools, not pursuing their religious agendas. And I mean, of course, ultimately, this is the problem with the Catholic school system, with a religious school system under the umbrella of a state taxpayer-funded school. But it's also a symptom yet again of elected trustees using these largely powerless elected positions as ways to further really very unpleasant agendas, in my opinion. I mean, the trustee has the right to oppose abortion, sure, but her job is to be a school trustee, not to be an anti-abortion zealot. But that's what these boards have been taken over by.
The cool fact is, I know that these trustees are coming from this a place of they want to preserve Catholic education, they want to preserve the Catholicity of these schools and whatnot. The irony is, the farther they pursue this agenda, the less slack the public will give to them, and it is only a matter of time before the public says enough's enough. We don't want Catholic schools anymore. If this is what we have to deal with, and I know that right now people are listening, but they have a right to it. It's in the Constitution. It's not. It's one religion's education system does not trump the rights to everyone else to live peacefully and free from bigotry or whatnot. If you cannot have a school funded by public tax dollars that preaches bigotry against LGBTQ, that denies the true horrors of the residential school program, that will not recognize the history of Black lives and that unique part of our history. You can't use a word unique, we're special, therefore we get special treatment. It won't fly. Right now, you're holding the entire Catholic education system, in my opinion, in this province is holding on by a thread. All that matters is if a government with the inclination to say, we're just going to stop funding it, it's elected to power. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, and traditionally it was the Liberal Party that were the greatest sort of defenders and champions of Catholic education. But yeah, I mean, the Constitution guarantees that Roman Catholics will continue to enjoy the privileges they had before Confederation. There was no state Catholic school system before Confederation. In fact, there wasn't for best part of the entire history of Canada afterwards either. There were privately paid Catholic schools, so no one's going to ban private religious schools anytime soon, I don't think. But yeah, the whole state side of it, I really and it doesn't exist in other provinces, so it's like that.
The precedent is there. It's a matter of public will. It's already like the public acceptance of it is hanging by a thread already.
I absolutely think the public is losing patience with this. I mean, there are those who will defend it to the death, or hopefully not to the death, but there are those who will defend it to extremes. But I think the number of those people are smaller and smaller. I think most parents, the greatest problems would come with Emory felt that by abolishing the separate Catholic school board, there would be a reduction in the number of total schools, and that their child might have to change school, or if they felt that the quality of education was going to drop because let's face it, most people send their child to Catholic school, and many of those are not Catholics, because they feel, well, it's better than the local state school, local public school. Basically people are shopping around for the best school to send their kid to, and it's like, oh well, the Catholic one will do. That's not why the system is supposed to exist.
At the elementary level, though, it's only Catholics who can do that. Only Catholics get that privilege at the elementary level. Once you get into high school, then you can shop around a bit if you so wish. But by that point, you're pretty much kind of ingrained into what school system you're in. You know what? But you're right. I mean, this behavior doesn't enamor you to anyone. You're not excelling or exhuming the virtues of a Catholic education. If anything, you're making the argument to put the nail in the coffin, put it in the ground, and move on. And we'll see what happens on election day. We'll see if the Catholic voters of Burlington and Oakville want to send these two back to represent them at the board. Who knows? But we'll wait and see what happens on election day. But you know what? Let's call it a break there, and we'll come back with more after this. Okay, everyone, and we're back. Looking at Mississauga, which we don't get a chance to talk about Mississauga often that much, and it's been kind of a quiet municipal campaign over in Mississauga, honestly, except for last week when Mississauga mayor and mayoral candidate Bonnie Crombie decided to bring up the issue of MEXIT again, which basically, if you're not aware, Mayor Crombie is advocating that Mississauga leave the region of Peel and become the region of Mississauga, I guess. It's its own super city. I don't know what that would entail.
Single tier municipality,
right?
The best parallel is probably Hamilton, in that Hamilton is a single tier. Toronto is too, but in terms of smaller cities that operate this way, they do exist already. I'm just looking at the report from the CBC here, saying we would control our destiny at one table.
That's laughable.
The new name, I think.
No,
I think Fred Eisenberger might have something to say about that.
If you listen to this, podcast, you know that no, you don't get that power magically by leaving the regional government.
I mean, in all honesty, this is a bit of electioneering. This is a way to get some headlines for Bonnie Crombie in an election that probably is not getting many headlines. Mississauga just seems to produce boring elections and very static, certainly in the mayoral level. I mean, I think that there's a possibility of some change at the councillor level. Probably the race most sort of interesting from a point of view of change is the one with Ron Starr, the councillor who got in trouble with
his colleague.
With his colleague and the alleged damage to his colleague's car. There are a bunch of challenges facing Crombie, but it doesn't really seem like there's any real suspicion that they're
which makes me wonder, why bring this up? Here's my question. The last thing with anything MEH-XIT in it across the pond in your homeland, Roland, it's a disaster. Why would you want to compare your plan with that plan? Brexit is a disaster. The British economy is tanking. It is not the panacea that they were sold on. Why would you want to compare your plan to that just in a political angle? I don't get it. But my question is this: what really are you going to gain from leaving Peel region? Like if you think about it, what would you really gain? You've got to now find your own garbage and waste collection and disposal. You can't just, it's not as if you have a field you can just throw your waste and compost in a region, because Mississauga doesn't have any. Mississauga is completely urbanized. Last year they sold the last plot of land that was developable, and it is now completely a suburban sprawl land. They have nowhere to put garbage. So they would have to develop their own garbage plan and then pay somebody to ship it to another municipality to dispose of it, which I don't think will come cheap. Two, you have to develop your own public health region now, which that might be a little bit easier to do. I'll give them that one. But the last one I think is a real a real tricky one is now you've got to devise your own police service. Now, I mean, they could go hire the OPP and come in police, but the OPP is usually, I don't know if the OPP would be able to ramp up that quickly to cover a municipality the size of Mississauga. Usually, a rural municipality hires the OPP only because they say we just don't have the tax base to pay and maintain our own police force. Mississauga would, but that's I question if that's really going to be a huge amount of savings. Police forces aren't cheap.
Yeah, I mean, and it could well be that. Well, actually, no, they would be. One of the options open to them would be that they kept within Peel Regional Police.
Then what's the point?
Then indeed, what is the point? I mean, you're controlling trace. I think this is purely about grabbing some headlines and job. Mission accomplished. She grabbed some headlines. It's the only thing that's got a headline from Mississauga over this whole thing. I don't think it makes a blind bit of difference. I mean, there's a sort of total pot of government dollars that will go to various levels of government. I certainly don't think Hamilton is better governed because it's a single tier municipality. I don't think Halton is worse governed because it isn't. I don't think it makes any bloody difference, really. It's a matter of which what goes on the letterhead. If you merged Halton into a single tier municipality, which some people thought was going to happen back in 2018 when the Conservatives came in, I think it'd be a shame from a psychological point of view for the individual communities. I think amalgamation for Hamilton has come with a lot of unpleasant side effects in terms of exactly what it meant for places. Meant for a kind of war between the old cities and the new cities and the rest of it. But I don't think it really amounts to a whole hill of beans, really. Your total tax dollars will probably work out roughly the same. It certainly doesn't save money. That was established in Hamilton as well. That the reason for amalgamation was we'll get, economies of scale, we'll get rid of all these bureaucrats that we don't need. And actually you end up spending the same or more. Because that's just how bureaucracy works. So it's a non-thing. I mean, I just think there's nothing to this other than let's grab a headline.
I agree. I think, well, I mean, it was brought up, Mayor Crombie brought it up in 2019. It was previously it was initially brought up by Hazel McCallion when she was mayor to secede from Peel. I personally look at, I don't think it'll save money. If anything, I think it'll cost money. The fact of the matter, when you exit something, when you leave something out of a fit, right? I think we deserve better. 9 times out of 10, it ends up costing you more in the end. I go to Brexit. That thing was supposed to save the money. It did not. They're still paying for it. I think Mississauga, if they left, they would still cost more because it's that initial startup. You have to you have to go hire a new police chief. You have to hire police officers from scratch. Are you going to tell Peel police officers, even though you might live in Mississauga, well, yeah, but their pension is in Peel, their union is in Peel. They've got, they know Peel. They're okay, fine. They just patrol Brampton or Dufferin or Dufferin Caledon or whatever. It's a lot harder than say, well, now I got to hire people and train people. I've got to pay for that bureaucracy. I've got to find the infrastructure. I got to hire the cars. I got to buy the equipment, the guns, the bulletproof vests, all that stuff.
Well, and even assuming that they basically come to some deal with Peel, whereby Peel gives them half their equipment and half their staff. Again,
what's the point?
And there's still a huge amount of costs in that transition from literally buying the new letterheads for the new police service.
Right.
I don't see the point. I really don't see the point.
I also don't see
it's just a way of a politician saying, I'm on Mississauga's side, not those bad guys from Brampton. And in this case, I'll actually take the Brampton side. It doesn't matter. Regional government is not sexy for a reason. It doesn't do anything very sexy. It's drains and roads and garbage collection.
But I don't understand why a mayor so clearly out in front like Bonnie Crombie would stoop to this. That's what I'm puzzled at, is that she's not really, she's not facing any serious contenders. Like there's nobody that you're like, oh, that, they're nipping at her heels. She's got to watch out for this person. That person doesn't. Everyone's predicting that she's going to moonwalk back into the mayor's office because there's not really a contender there. I agree with your analysis that this is just a politician kind of look at. I'm so proud of the place I live. Vote for me.
And I don't think actually, to be fair, I don't. Sorry, Joel. Yeah, to an extent, I don't question her motivations. I'm sure she honestly believes that this is a good idea. I also believe at the same time that she realizes that it plays well with people in Mississauga, and it's just. I don't think it's going to play very well, but I mean. I don't know. I mean, politicians are simple folk. She's not been getting any headlines. She probably wants some. It's that simple.
Maybe. All right, let's go back down the Kiwi all the way to Hamilton, because one thing we can't be accused of, Roland, is not being independent.
we're independently rude to everybody.
Oh, damn right.
And it's Keelan Loomis's turn this week.
Yes. You go ahead. I start off the last two. You start this one off.
Yeah. And actually, that's not the primary story we're going to talk about, although it is going to come up. I mean, there was a poll today in the Hamilton Spectator about where the mayoral race is, and according to the poll, I'm just putting up the numbers right here. Basically, Andrea Horwath is in the lead somewhat, not comfortably, but in the lead by, more than a couple of points.
I believe it was 8, wasn't it?
Yeah, so 36% of voters favour Andrea Horwath. Keelan Loomis has halved her lead, halved the gap between him and her. He's at 29%. And 12% for Bob Bratina, and then 3% for Ijaz Butt, which kind of reflects. I mean, we were talking last week about our impressions and going purely on lawn signs, and it's I don't think this is out of step with what we said. We felt that the candidates see Loomis as the threat, and I guess that can go either direction. Either if you're in the lead, he's a threat because he's the next one, and if you're in third place, he's the threat because he's in second and he's the guy you need to get past. So, and it reflects what you'd expect with the much higher level of name recognition of Andrea Horwath. But I mean, it does reiterate that Keelan Loomis has done, I think, as someone who's never run any level of government before, very well to get this far. He has made the running in many ways. And Andrea Horwath has got where she is on name recognition, and I don't feel much else.
Well, I just want to say this poll confirms that we got it right first. I mean, if we did, people would say, how do we do Hamilton's going? We said Andrea's in the lead, like she's got that name recognition. It's a very strong asset in her quiver, in her it's a very strong arrow in her quiver, and she's using it every chance she gets. So be it. But Keelan Loomis is a candidate that constantly just kind of comes out and surprises us at putting together a good campaign. And we all agreed Bob Bertino was a distant third. He was an also ran this time around. Now,
I can't resist saying this as a former long-time volunteer for the Ontario Liberals who was infuriated by the the Hamilton branch of the Ontario Liberals and their self-destructiveness. But once again, the Hamilton, Ontario Liberals, who have stumped up for Bob Bratina, with Vito Scro there at the front, are heading for another ignominious defeat, just as they did in the provincial election in Stony Creek, just as they did in Vito Scro's own attempts to run at mayor and for MPP and for other levels of government. They just can't stop losing, and if they'd go away, maybe some other candidates might have a chance. But anyway, I couldn't resist that.
Clearly, but but what I would say is interesting to me is the fact that we praise Keelan Loomis for okay, he's coming out, he's the only candidate honestly I think has put forward a viable platform or something that you can really kind of dissect and take apart. His gaffe last week was, I'm not gonna say it was a campaign killer, clearly it wasn't, but I think it did sow inkling in Hamiltonians' eyes of, is this guy right for prime time yet? And by that, I mean, he had a gaffe in the press where he essentially was suggesting that the social housing should be basically almost sold off, or that another agency should be covering it. He since has kind of recanted that, and he said it was a misquote or misstatement on his part.
He didn't. Yeah, he didn't deny the statement. He just said he said it at the end of a long day, and it's not what he actually thinks. So yeah, so I think that was Thursday. It was a bad day for Keenan Loomis and his campaign. There was that, and also the story that back in the midst of time when Michelle Obama came to Hamilton as a guest of the Chamber of Commerce. Loomis reacted badly to an article that questioned why he was the interviewer at the event, and went to the YMCA and sort of personally complained. That was dumb. I mean, and again, to be fair, he doesn't deny it was dumb. I mean, it's a damned if you do and if you're damned if you don't. If you're, as a candidate, we want our candidates to admit their mistakes and to be willing to learn, and also to be less guarded and to be less guarded about policy and maybe throw some ideas out there which aren't great. However, the minute something comes up, there's quite a long way in the past in which the people involved on the receiving end of his comments at the YMCA didn't particularly want brought up, was the impression I got. We pile on and say, oh, well, this proves that he's... Now, I don't want to downplay either of these things. I mean, I don't think it's a very good excuse at all to say it's the end of a long day, and suddenly I came up with this kind of policy. And it's like, yeah, really? And there's going to be a lot of long days when you're in government, and going down. I mean, I don't care how inexperienced and young you might be. I've never got in my car and gone down somewhere to harangue someone about an opinion they have about me. I usually would agree with them rather, but... so it's not good. And I do feel that all three of the leading candidates, all three candidates with even an outside chance of winning here, have serious questions about them in very different ways. Loomis is the inexperienced one, and he's the person we know least about. Andrea Horvath just, she's a known entity, and that's almost the bad thing, right? And Bob Bertina, well, kind of the same, I guess. There's no perfect candidate, and we shouldn't really expect there to be a perfect candidate. I actually think, I tried to sort of make a positive statement on Twitter last week. It's like, well, there are three candidates, and even though Bob Bertina's policies and the way he's running his campaign, not my cup of tea, despite that, I would say he is a candidate of significant standing, and he deserves some respect for that. All three of them, these are three good candidates to choose from, and they're all quite different. I mean, you can't say they're all the same. And it has made an interesting campaign. And I think some of the heat and even vitriol that we're seeing between the kind of supporters of the various camps now kind of speaks to that the people are getting passionate and involved in their campaigns, and they think strongly about it. And that's a good thing.
I'll say this about this campaign is... it's definitely been one of the more interesting ones. I would say if Keenan Loomis is listening, he's got to treat this as the city's first impression of himself. Like this is no as much as he's relying on the Chamber of Commerce background as much as he's relying on the Chamber of Commerce stuff to back him on this. Not everybody is familiar with that. Not everybody. It's a good resume builder, but small gaps like this they sow doubt in people's minds, and I think that's what you're seeing in the polls. That you feel like, well, okay, people might say, well, I don't necessarily like Andrea, but I know what I'm getting with her, and that's enough. The other thing in that poll, and I just remember this having read it, that Andrea's support is among the young and kind of the downtown, meaning like now. It's an interesting coalition to make. Keenan Loomis's support seems to be a bit more widespread around the city and deals with a lot more of the I don't want to say elderly, but like the more older crowd and more well-to-do, and definitely in the suburban pockets of Hamilton. I find that's going to be an interesting dynamic in terms of how the city elects its new mayor, only because Andrea Horwath, if she's relying on the young people to come out and vote, they don't. That's the thing. Like they'll say, yeah, I really want so-and-so to win. Are they going to make the time to go down the polls? There's only one politician in the history of the world that got elected on the basis of young people, was Barack Obama, I believe, in his first election. Oh, and the young people didn't show up in the second one because they felt they got burnt. So, that it'll be an interesting dynamic to watch on election night to see whose coalition gets out first to the polls. Because
I mean, it's an interesting point now whether Loomis tries to pivot to go after Protina votes and to basically say, I'm the compromise candidate. Okay, you would have wanted Protina. I mean, there are a lot of, particularly amongst the more senior end of the spectrum, particularly in the suburbs, who will never vote for Andrea Horwath because of the NDP association, and they're just not on board with that. Rightly or wrongly, it's just I'm not endorsing that point of view. I'm just saying that's the thing. But they might vote for Loomis rather than Protina if they think Loomis has a chance. And this is where ranked ballots would be a great thing, wouldn't it? Because ranked ballots would give everybody a chance to say, who's your second choice? And I think, that would be really, really interesting in this election. But we don't have that possibility. I think what is very clear is it's not going to be a matter of Protina coming up the middle on a split vote or anything like that. It's between Loomis and Horwath. And again, I'm going to reiterate, that's kind of a good thing. That those, I think there's a lot of good in both candidates' platforms, and both in different ways do represent a fresh start for Hamilton, and that again is a good thing. I think if Protina had won, that would have been the most depressing outcome. And we're speaking very soon. I mean, if some miracle happens and he wins on election day, but I don't see that happening. He's very far out at the moment. But it's as people get more and more heated on behalf of their particular candidate, just bear in mind this is a good result for Hamilton with the two people who are in the lead at the moment.
You know what? Let's leave it at that for this episode. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. We'll be back next week. Sorry, next week with more 905.
Bye-bye.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
You looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.